What does a 10-year-old promise mean? For two college friends, it was everything. One a tech genius who would go on to build a billion-dollar empire. The other, the brightest mind in her class, destined for greatness. But life has a cruel way of tearing up the script. 10 years later, they meet again. He's dining at one of the most exclusive restaurants in New York City, closing a deal that will make him a legend. And she is the one taking his order. He sees a ghost from his past, wearing a waitress's apron, her eyes holding a story of pain he can't comprehend. He tries to help, but what he uncovers is not a simple story of bad luck. It's a dark web of betrayal, corporate greed, and a devastating secret that could destroy them both. The clinking of silverware against porcelain was the background music of Timothy Cole's new life. It was a sound as familiar to him now as the hum of a server farm or the frantic tapping of keys had been a decade ago. Tonight, the sound was particularly crisp inside the Gilded Compass, a restaurant so exclusive that its reservations were traded by the city's elite like stock options. A soft golden light glinted off the crystal glasses and the polished mahogany walls, creating a warm cocoon of wealth and power. Across the table, Jonathan Pierce, a senior partner from the monolithic firm Sterling Pierce Capital, swirled his wine, a deep crimson liquid that probably cost more than Timothy's first car. The synergy is undeniable, Timothy Jonathan said, his voice a low, confident purr. Garrett Innovations is the missing piece for your global logistics network. With their patents, your Helios platform won't just be dominant. It will be omnipotent. Timothy nodded a practiced, non-committal gesture. He was on the verge of the biggest acquisition of his career. At 32, his company, Helios Dynamics, had revolutionized supply chain management with predictive AI. This merger with Garrett Innovations would catapult them into the stratosphere. He should have been ecstatic, buzzing with the thrill of the hunt. Instead, he felt a strange detachment, as if he were watching a movie of his own life. His fiancée, Bridget Davenport, sat beside him, the picture of effortless grace. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and a diamond necklace, a gift from him, sparkled at her throat. She placed a delicate hand on his arm. "Darling, you seem distant." Jonathan is right. This is a monumental moment. "Just processing the scale of it all," Timothy murmured, forcing a smile. Bridget was perfect. The daughter of a shipping magnate, she understood his world, his ambition. She was a partner in every sense of the word. It was as he turned his gaze from Bridget that he saw her. She moved between tables with a quiet efficiency that spoke of long, grueling hours. She wore the restaurant's uniform, a simple black dress with a crisp white apron, but it couldn't conceal the familiar way she held her shoulders or the slight tilt of her head when she listened. Her dark brown hair was pulled back into a tight, severe ponytail, and exhaustion had carved faint lines around her eyes, but there was no mistaking her. The world around Timothy seemed to slow down, the ambient noise fading into a dull roar. His wine glass felt heavy in his hand. It was Kelly Petroff. Kelly. His Kelly. The girl who had shared instant noodles with him at 3 a.m. in the MIT library, who had debated philosophy and quantum mechanics with equal passion, whose laughter was the soundtrack to the best years of his life. She was the one who had believed in his wild, impossible ideas before any venture capitalist had. They had been inseparable, a two-person universe of dreams and ambition. The last time he'd seen her, she had been accepting the Dean's List Award for academic excellence in comparative literature, her future a brilliant, blazing supernova. And now she was clearing plates from a table a few feet away, her expression a mask of polite neutrality. Timothy Bridget's voice cut through his shock. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." He had. A ghost of a life he'd left behind, a ghost of a promise he'd failed to keep. Their silly college pact. If one of us makes it big, we pull the other one up, no matter what. He'd made it bigger than either of them could have ever imagined. Where had she been? He watched her approach their table, her notepad in hand. Her eyes scanned Jonathan, then Bridget, and finally they landed on him. For a fraction of a second, the professional mask slipped. A flicker of something shock recognition, perhaps pain, crossed her features before being ruthlessly suppressed. Her gaze became impersonal, her posture stiffening almost imperceptibly. "Good evening," she said, her voice, a low, practiced monotone that was nothing like the vibrant, expressive voice he remembered. "May I take your order?" Jonathan began to speak, but Timothy couldn't hear him. He was locked on Kelly's face. The spark that had always been in her eyes, a fierce intelligence and a mischievous wit, was gone. In its place was a profound weariness, a deep, unsettling emptiness. "Kelly," he whispered the name, feeling foreign and yet intimately familiar on his tongue. Her jaw tightened. "I'm sorry, sir, you must have me mistaken for someone else. My name is Lauren." She didn't even look at him, her pen poised over her pad. It was a clear dismissal, a wall erected so quickly and so completely that it knocked the breath out of him. He knew it was her. He knew the tiny scar just above her left eyebrow from when she'd fallen off her bike during sophomore year. He knew the way she unconsciously chewed on her lower lip when she was stressed. She was doing it right now. Bridget shot him a questioning, slightly annoyed look. "Timothy, don't be rude." The woman said her name is Lauren. Feeling the heat of embarrassment creep up his neck, Timothy cleared his throat. "My apologies. You strongly resemble an old friend." Kelly or Lauren simply nodded, her expression unreadable. "A lot of people say I have one of those faces. Now about your orders." They gave their orders, the conversation stilted and awkward. Timothy couldn't focus on the discussion of profit margins and market integration. His mind was a maelstrom of questions. What had happened to her? Why was she here in this uniform pretending not to know him? After graduation, she was supposed to go to Oxford on a full scholarship. He had tried to find her a few years after he'd made his first million, but her old number was disconnected. Her social media was gone. It was like she had vanished from the face of the earth. He had assumed she was living a brilliant life somewhere in Europe, too busy and important to keep in touch with her geeky college buddy. The reality was so jarring, so profoundly wrong, that it made his stomach churn. As she walked away from their table, her back straight and rigid, he felt a chasm open between the man he was now, the titan of industry in a bespoke suit, and the boy he had been. The boy who had sworn he would never lose touch with his best friend. The rest of the dinner was a blur. He feigned interest, made the right noises, and shook Jonathan's hand on the preliminary agreement. But his eyes kept drifting across the dining room, searching for the ghost in the waitress's apron. He saw her refilling water glasses, explaining the dessert menu, smiling a tired, professional smile that never reached her eyes. When the meal was over, and they were preparing to leave, Timothy excused himself. "I'll be right back," he told Bridget, ignoring her inquisitive frown. He found Kelly in a small alcove near the kitchen, stacking clean plates. The clatter of the kitchen was louder here, the gilded glamour of the dining room replaced by stark, fluorescent reality. "Kelly, it's me," he said softly. She didn't turn around. "Please, sir. I could lose my job. I don't care about your job," he said, his voice more forceful than he intended. "I care about you. What happened? Why are you here? Why did you pretend you didn't know me?" She finally turned, and the raw emotion in her eyes struck him like a physical blow. It was a mixture of anger, humiliation, and a sorrow so deep it seemed bottomless. "Why, Timothy?" she said, her voice a harsh whisper. "Because my life isn't a feel-good story for you to hear over your expensive wine. Because the girl you knew is gone. This is who I am now. A waitress named Lauren, so please go back to your perfect life and your perfect fiancé, and leave me alone." She turned her back on him, resuming her task with shaking hands. The finality in her voice was absolute. Timothy stood there for a long moment, frozen, the sounds of the bustling restaurant fading away. He was a man who could solve complex logistical problems on a global scale, a man who could command boardrooms and bend markets to his will. But in that moment, faced with the impenetrable wall of his oldest friend's pain, he had never felt more powerless. He walked back to his table, the multi-billion-dollar merger, suddenly feeling insignificant. His world tilting on an axis he hadn't known was so fragile. The drive back to his penthouse apartment was silent and tense. The city lights of New York blurred into streaks of gold and white, but Timothy saw none of it. Kelly's face, etched with a pain he couldn't decipher, was superimposed over everything. "So are you going to tell me what that was all about?" Bridget finally asked, her voice cool and measured as she broke the silence. She was reapplying her lipstick in the vanity mirror of the Rolls-Royce, a small, precise movement that belied her irritation. She was an old friend from college, Timothy said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Her name is Kelly Petroff. We were very close." "Lauren. You mean—" Bridget corrected lightly, and she clearly didn't feel the same way. "It was incredibly awkward, Timothy. You put her on the spot." "Something is wrong, Bridget. Terribly wrong. The Kelly I knew was... She was brilliant. She had a full ride to Oxford lined up. She was going to be a world-renowned academic. She shouldn't be a waitress." Bridget sighed, snapping her lipstick shut. "People's lives take different turns, darling. Not everyone is destined to build an empire. Maybe she dropped out. Maybe she preferred a simpler life. You can't just waltz in after 10 years and expect to pick up where you left off. You live in a different world now." Her words were logical, but they felt dismissive, hollow. A simpler life. The look in Kelly's eyes wasn't simple. It was haunted. The next morning, Timothy sat in his home office, a sleek, minimalist space with a panoramic view of Central Park. The signed letter of intent for the Garrett Innovations merger sat on his desk, a testament to his success. He ignored it. Instead, he opened his laptop and began to dig. He was no longer a coder, but he still had the skills. More importantly, he had resources. He hired a private investigator, a discreet professional named Ben Carter, a man known for his ability to find people who didn't want to be found. Timothy gave him Kelly's full name and the few details he remembered. MIT class of 2015, comparative literature major. While Ben worked his magic, Timothy tried to piece things together himself. He found old yearbooks online, their faces young and full of unbridled optimism. There they were, posing with the debate club trophy. There was another of him and Kelly sitting on the steps of the library, laughing, a half-eaten pizza box between them. A pang of nostalgia, sharp and painful, shot through him. He remembered her talking about her family, her father, a brilliant but unassuming architect named Dmitri Petrov, her mother who had passed away years ago, and her much younger brother, Leo. The preliminary report from Ben Carter arrived within 48 hours. It was a stark, brutal summary of a life derailed. Kelly had never made it to Oxford. She had deferred her admission for a year. Then another, before officially withdrawing. The reason was buried in public records of debt and medical liens. Her father Dmitri had been diagnosed with a rare aggressive form of cancer, just months after her graduation. The medical bills were astronomical. Dmitri's small architectural firm, Petrov Designs, had folded under the financial strain. He had passed away 3 years ago. The report continued. Kelly had become the sole guardian of her brother Leo, who was now 16. She had taken on a series of low-paying jobs, bookstore clerk, barista tutor, before landing the waitress position at the Gilded Compass, one of the few jobs that offered enough in tips to keep them afloat in a tiny rent-controlled apartment in Queens. She had legally changed her first name to Lauren 2 years ago, a clear attempt to sever ties with her past. The report was a gut punch. While he had been celebrating funding rounds and IPOs, she had been watching her father die, sacrificing her dreams to raise her brother. The shame was a physical weight in his chest. His silly college pact echoed in his mind, mocking him. We pull the other one up, no matter what. He hadn't even known she was falling. Driven by a desperate need to fix this, he made a decision. He couldn't just offer her money. Her pride wouldn't allow it. The brief, humiliating encounter at the restaurant had made that clear. He needed a different approach. He created a position within his company's philanthropic arm, the Helios Foundation, Director of Literary Outreach. The job description was tailored specifically to her skills managing educational grants, liaising with universities, curating a digital library for underprivileged communities. The salary was substantial enough to change her life completely. It was a perfect, elegant solution, a handout disguised as an opportunity. He went to her apartment building in Queens the next day. It was a world away from his Park Avenue penthouse. The building was old, the brickwork crumbling the air in the hallway, thick with the smell of old cooking and disinfectant. He felt conspicuous and out of place in his tailored suit. He knocked on the door of apartment 4B. After a moment, it opened a crack held by a chain lock. Kelly peered out her face, pale, dark circles under her eyes. She looked even more tired than she had at the restaurant. "What are you doing here, Timothy?" she asked, her voice flat. "I know about your father." "I'm so sorry, Kelly. I had no idea." Her expression hardened. How do you know that I looked you up. I was worried. You had me investigated?" She stated a bitter accusation. "You hired someone to dig through the wreckage of my life." "For what? So you could satisfy your curiosity?" "No," he insisted, pushing a large envelope through the gap in the door. "To help. Please just look at this. It's a job offer. A real one. It's perfect for you. It's not charity. It's a position you're more than qualified for." She took the envelope, her eyes scanning the official letterhead of his foundation. He saw a flicker of something in her face, a moment of desperate hope before it was extinguished, replaced by a steely resolve. She pushed the envelope back out at him. "I don't want your pity, Timothy. I don't want your perfectly crafted job that you invented 5 minutes ago. I am handling my own life." "Handling it," he asked, his frustration mounting. "By working yourself to the bone in a job you hate, by letting go of everything you ever wanted. That's not handling it. Kelly, that's just surviving. Let me help you. You want to help." She shot back her voice, rising with a decade of repressed anger. "Where were you 10 years ago when my father got sick? Where were you when I was selling his books to pay for his medication? Where were you when I had to tell Oxford I wasn't coming? You were on the cover of magazines becoming a billionaire. You didn't look back, not once. So don't you dare show up now with your guilt money and your perfect solutions and pretend you're some kind of savior." The door slammed shut, the rattle of the chain lock echoing in the quiet hallway. Timothy stood there, stunned into silence. Her words were like daggers, and they all hit their mark. He had been so wrapped up in his own meteoric rise that he had failed the one person who had mattered most. He had assumed she was fine because it was easier than considering any other possibility. He returned to his car defeated. Bridget's words came back to him. You live in a different world now. Maybe she was right. Maybe the gulf between his world and Kelly's was too wide to bridge. That evening, Bridget found him staring out the window, the job offer still in his hand. Let me guess, she said, sipping a glass of Chardonnay. She turned you down. Timothy nodded. I'm not surprised, Bridget said, setting her glass down. Timothy, you need to let this go. You have the Garrett merger to focus on. This is a distraction, a relic from a past that is no longer yours. Some people are just not meant to be saved. Her clinical assessment sent a chill down his spine. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time, he saw a hardness in her eyes that he had never noticed before. He had thought her pragmatism was a strength. Now it felt like a chilling lack of empathy. He knew she was wrong. This wasn't about saving Kelly. It was about something deeper. Kelly's accusation that he hadn't looked back was true. But her pride, her fierce, almost self-destructive independence told him there was more to the story. The numbers in Ben's report, the debt, the medical bills, they were high, but something felt missing. Something still didn't add up. Why such complete devastation? Why was she so adamant about pushing him away? He knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones that he was only scratching the surface of her story. And he would not, could not walk away again. A week passed. Timothy threw himself into the due diligence for the Garrett merger, working with a feverish intensity his team hadn't seen in years. It was a welcome distraction, a complex problem with clear variables and measurable outcomes, unlike the intractable, emotionally charged mess of Kelly's life. But every night after Bridget was asleep, he would find himself in his office, staring at the file Ben Carter had compiled, feeling like a man trying to read a book with half the pages torn out. He couldn't shake the feeling that Kelly was protecting something or someone. Her anger felt bigger than just resentment toward him. It felt like a shield. He decided to try a different approach, not as Timothy Cole, the billionaire CEO, but as Timothy, her old friend. He left the suit, and the driver at home put on a simple pair of jeans and a hoodie and took the subway to Queens. He found a small, gritty coffee shop near her apartment and waited. He didn't have to wait long. Around 4 p.m. she emerged from her building, walking with a young man who had to be her brother, Leo. The family resemblance was strong, but where Kelly's features were taut with worry, his were still soft, with the lingering traces of boyhood. They walked to a nearby park, and Timothy followed at a discreet distance. He watched them sit on a bench. Leo was animated, talking about school. A girl, a video game, the normal chatter of a 16-year-old. Kelly listened, a soft, genuine smile gracing her lips. It was the first real smile he had seen on her face, and it was like a glimpse of the sun through dense storm clouds. In that moment, she wasn't a waitress or a charity case. She was a sister, a guardian, a young woman, holding her fragmented family together with sheer force of will. He understood then that her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for him. He waited until Leo had headed off to meet some friends before he approached her. She saw him coming, and her smile vanished, the defensive mask snapping back into place. "Are you stalking me now, Timothy?" she asked, her voice weary. "I just want to talk," he said, sitting on the other end of the bench. "No job offers no money. Just talk, like we used to." She looked away, her gaze fixed on the kids playing in the distance. "There's nothing to talk about. 5 minutes, Kelly. That's all I'm asking. For the sake of the kid who shared his ramen with you, Because you spent your last $5 on a rare book of poetry. A ghost of a memory seemed to soften her expression. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't start with her problems. He started with his. He told her about the relentless pressure, the soulless board meetings, the crushing loneliness that often accompanied his success. He told her how he missed the days when his biggest problem was a difficult algorithm, not the livelihoods of 10,000 employees. He wasn't asking for sympathy. He was trying to tear down the wall of money and power that stood between them, to show her the man she used to know was still in there. She listened in silence. When he was done, a long moment passed. "You think your life is hard," she finally said, her voice quiet but laced with a bitter irony. "No," he said honestly. "I know it's not, but it's not as perfect as it looks from the outside. And yours, it shouldn't be this hard. I read the report, Kelly. The medical bills for your dad, they were insane. But even so, his firm should have had assets insurance. It shouldn't have led to complete ruin. That was it. That was the key." He saw her flinch, a subtle but definite reaction. "You don't know anything," she whispered. "Then tell me," he urged, his voice gentle. "Tell me what I don't know. I'm not here to judge you or save you. I'm here to listen. I owe you that." She looked at him, her eyes searching his for a long time. He saw a battle raging within her, pride versus desperation. Finally, with a shuddering sigh, the dam broke. The story she told was not just one of tragedy, but of calculated, cruel betrayal. "My father didn't just get sick," she began, her voice trembling. "He was destroyed. He had a business partner, a man he trusted like a brother. His name is Wendell Garrett." Timothy's blood ran cold. Garrett. As in Garrett Innovations. It couldn't be. Kelly didn't notice his reaction, lost in the painful memory. Dad and Wendell started the firm together from nothing. Dad was the creative genius, the architect. Garrett handled the business side, contracts, finances, clients. When Dad got his diagnosis, he was too sick to work. He trusted Garrett to manage everything to keep the firm afloat, so there would be something left for me and Leo. She paused, taking a shaky breath. But Garrett was a snake. While my father was undergoing chemotherapy, Garrett was systematically bleeding the company dry. He took out massive loans against the firm's assets. He cooked the books, diverted funds to his own shell corporations. He had my father, who was medicated and barely lucid signed documents. He didn't understand papers that gave Garrett complete control, and transferred patents for Dad's innovative green building designs into Garrett's name. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Garrett Innovations. Their key patents were in sustainable logistics architecture. They weren't his. They were Dmitry Petrov's. By the time we realized what was happening, Kelly continued, tears now streaming down her face. It was too late. The firm was bankrupt. The patents were gone. We were drowning in debt, not just from the medical bills, but from the fraudulent loans Garrett had taken out in the company's name. We lost everything. Our house, my father's life savings. Everything. "Why didn't you go to the police? Why didn't you sue him?" Timothy asked, his voice hoarse. "We tried," she said, a broken, hollow laugh escaping her lips. "We hired a lawyer, but Garrett had covered his tracks perfectly. The documents had my father's signature. He claimed Dad was a reckless spender, that he'd made bad investments. He produced fabricated emails and altered financial records. He painted my father as incompetent and himself as the loyal partner who tried to save the company. No one believed us. He had money, power, and a team of ruthless lawyers. We had nothing." She finally looked at him, her eyes pleading for him to understand. "He threatened us, Timothy. He made it clear that if I pursued it, He would ruin my life completely. He said he'd make sure I could never get a decent job, that he'd drag our family name through the mud until no one would ever trust the name Petrov again. And I had Leo to think about. I couldn't risk it, so I buried it. I changed my name, took this awful job, and focused on just surviving, on making sure Leo could have a normal life. I pushed you away because I was ashamed, and because Garrett is powerful, I didn't want his darkness to touch anyone else. Timothy sat in stunned silence, a storm of fury and disbelief raging within him. The man he was about to make his business partner, the man Jonathan Pierce had called the missing piece, was a corporate ghoul who had built his empire on the grave of his best friend's father. The detachment he had felt was gone, replaced by a white-hot, singular purpose. This was no longer about pity or charity. This was about justice. The puzzle wasn't just about why Kelly was a waitress. It was about why Wendell Garrett was a respected CEO. He reached out and for the first time in 10 years took her hand. It was trembling, but she didn't pull away. "You're not fighting him alone anymore, Kelly," he said, his voice low and steady, with a newfound dangerous resolve. "He didn't just destroy your father. He's trying to do business with me." And he just made the biggest mistake of his life. The world had shifted on its axis. The Garrett Innovations merger was no longer a business deal. It was a Trojan horse. Wendell Garrett wasn't a potential partner. He was the villain of a story Timothy was now inextricably a part of. Returning to his office, the sleek glass and chrome space now felt like a war room. He looked at the merger proposal on his desk, the pages filled with financial projections and synergistic rhetoric, and felt a wave of nausea. He was shaking hands with the man who had orchestrated the ruin of the Petrov family. His first call was to Ben Carter. "But I need you to drop everything," Timothy said, his voice tight. "I want a full, deep-dive forensic investigation into a man named Wendell Garrett and his company Garrett Innovations. I'm talking about his entire history. I want to know where every dollar came from. Check for shell corporations, hidden accounts, unusual transfers, anything that looks remotely suspicious, especially from about 10 years ago. And Ben, be invisible. This man cannot know we're looking." "Understood." Ben replied, his tone all business. "Is this related to the Petrov case?" "It is the Petrov case," Timothy confirmed grimly. His next conversation was far more difficult. Bridget was in the living room, coordinating seating charts for an upcoming charity gala. She was chairing the Starlight Foundation Gala. It was one of the premier philanthropic events of the year, a gathering of New York's most powerful and influential figures. "We need to put a hold on the merger," Timothy said, standing in the doorway. Bridget looked up from her tablet, an eyebrow arched in disbelief. "A hold, Timothy. We're set to sign the final papers in 2 weeks. Jonathan Pierce just called to confirm. What on earth are you talking about? I have information that suggests Wendell Garrett is not who he appears to be. His business practices are unethical, potentially criminal." What information, she demanded, standing up. "Don't tell me this is about your waitress friend. You can't seriously be thinking of torpedoing a billion-dollar deal, the biggest deal of your life, based on some sob story from a woman you haven't seen in a decade. It's not a sob story, Bridget. It's a documented case of fraud and betrayal. He stole his patents. He built his company on the back of a dying man." Bridget stared at him, her expression a mixture of frustration and incredulity. "And you have proof of this hard, incontrovertible proof that would stand up in court, or just her word for it. I'm working on getting the proof," he admitted. "But my gut tells me she's telling the truth." "Your gut," she scoffed. "Timothy, this is the real world, not some sentimental college drama. You are the CEO of a publicly traded company. You have a fiduciary duty to your shareholders. You can't make decisions based on your gut or your loyalty to some long-lost flame. Wendell Garrett is a respected figure. You accuse him of this without ironclad proof, and he won't just sue you, he will destroy you. He'll call it corporate sabotage. Your reputation, everything you've built, will be in jeopardy. Every word she said was rational, logical, and completely devoid of morality. She saw the situation as a series of risks and rewards, a balance sheet of potential outcomes. She couldn't see the human cost, the profound injustice that screamed out from between the lines. So I should just ignore it, Timothy challenged, his voice rising. I should sign the deal, shake his hand, and make a man like that even richer and more powerful. Yes, she exclaimed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. If that's what's best for the company, what happened 10 years ago is in the past. It has nothing to do with Helios Dynamics or this merger. You need to separate your emotions from your business. I thought you understood that. The chasm between them had widened into a canyon. He was looking at his fiancée, the woman he thought he would spend his life with, and realizing he didn't know her at all. Or perhaps he was just seeing her clearly for the first time. Her ambition wasn't a companion to his. It was a replacement for her compassion. I can't do that, he said quietly. There are some lines I won't cross. Then you're a fool, she said, her voice cold as ice. You're throwing everything away for a ghost. The battle lines were drawn. The next day, Timothy met with Wendell Garrett under the pretense of finalizing merger details. The man was exactly as Kelly had described, charming, polished with a warm smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. He was in his late 50s with silvering hair and an impeccably tailored suit. He exuded an aura of avuncular authority. As Garrett spoke about synergy and future growth, Timothy felt a cold rage building inside him. He pictured this man at Dmitry Petrov's bedside, sliding legal documents in front of a dying man, his face a mask of false sympathy. I've always believed that innovation is nothing without integrity, Garrett said, leaning forward earnestly. It's the foundation upon which I built my company. The hypocrisy was so blatant, it was almost breathtaking. Timothy had to clench his fists under the table to keep his composure. I was particularly impressed with the foundational patents for your sustainable architecture designs, Timothy said, carefully probing. The Petrov Principles. I believe they were once called internally, an unusual name. Was there a story behind that, for the first time, a flicker of something, a brief, momentary loss of composure crossed Garrett's face? He recovered quickly, letting out a practiced chuckle. Ah, you've done your homework, he said smoothly. Dmitry Petrov, a brilliant, tragic figure. He was my partner years ago, a true artist, but sadly he had no head for business. The principles were his brainchild, yes, but they were unworkable, economically unfeasible. I had to refine them, streamline them, make them commercially viable after he passed. I kept the name for a while as a tribute. The lie was so effortless, so convincing, that Timothy understood how Kelly had stood no chance against him. Garrett had not just stolen Dmitry's work, he had stolen his entire narrative, recasting himself as the pragmatic savior of a brilliant but flawed dreamer. Timothy left the meeting more determined than ever. Proof. He needed irrefutable proof. Ben Carter's initial findings came in that evening. It was a maze of encrypted files and deleted records, but Ben was the best for a reason. He had found evidence of the shell corporations Kelly mentioned, all registered in offshore havens, and dissolved shortly after the bankruptcy of Petrov Designs. He had also found digital traces of the original patent filings, which had been scrubbed and altered. He's good, Ben said over the secure line. He used top-of-the-line data shredding software, but he got sloppy once. There's a ghost of a server backup in a third-party data storage facility in Delaware. According to the logs, it contains a full, unredacted snapshot of his company's financials from 10 years ago. It's our best shot at finding a direct link, the smoking gun that shows the money flowing from Petrov Designs into his pockets. "Can you get into it?" Timothy asked. "Here's the problem," Ben said. "It's triple encrypted, and one of the encryption keys isn't a password. It's a physical token, a unique USB key that he likely keeps on him at all times. To access that server even remotely, we need to physically plug that key into a networked computer for at least 30 seconds. It's the only way to authenticate the connection." Timothy's heart sank. Getting that close to Garrett for that long seemed impossible. He stared at the invitation to the Starlight Foundation Gala sitting on his desk. Bridget's perfectly scripted handwriting announced the guest of honor and keynote speaker, Wendell Garrett. An idea began to form in his mind, a wild, audacious, and incredibly risky plan. The gala would be the perfect stage. It was a high-security, high-profile event, but it was also the one place where Garrett, basking in the glow of philanthropy and public admiration, might let his guard down. The predator was walking into his own trap, and Timothy was about to spring it. The plan was a high-wire act with no safety net. It required perfect timing nerves of steel and a willingness to risk everything. Timothy brought Ben Carter into his penthouse, turning the space into a command center. They mapped out the floor plan of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel where the gala was being held. They studied the security schematics, the Wi-Fi network protocols, and the guest list. "This is insane, you know that," Ben said, pointing to a blueprint on the large screen. "We're talking about pulling off a digital heist in the middle of a black tie event, filled with the most powerful people in the city." "It's the only way," Timothy replied, his eyes focused and intense. "Garrett will be the center of attention. He'll be giving a speech. That's our window." The plan had 3 components. First, the distraction. They needed to create a public scene, something significant enough to draw all eyes away from Garrett for a crucial minute, allowing Timothy to get close to him. Second, the acquisition. Timothy, under the guise of either sympathizing with or admonishing Garrett during the commotion, would need to get his hands on the USB key. They theorized it would be on Garrett's keychain or in a specific pocket. Third, the execution. Once Timothy had the key, he would need to get it to a pre-staged laptop hidden in a nearby service room. Ben had prepared a small, powerful device that could clone the key's authentication signature in under 20 seconds. Once cloned, Ben could use the signature from his remote location to unlock the server in Delaware and begin the data extraction. The weakest link, the most volatile and unpredictable part of the plan, was the distraction. It had to be personal, emotional, and public. There was only one person who could create a scene that Garrett couldn't ignore: Kelly. Timothy met her again at the same coffee shop. He laid out the entire situation, the discovery of the server, the need for the physical key, and the audacious plan to get it at the gala. She was horrified. No, absolutely not. A public scene, confronting him in front of all those people. "Timothy, he'll destroy me. He'll call me a liar, an extortionist. He'll turn everyone against me." "I'll be right there," Timothy promised. "This won't be like last time. You won't be alone. The moment you confront him, you set my part of the plan in motion. By the time he recovers, we'll have everything we need to expose him for what he is. This isn't just about revenge, Kelly. It's about getting your father's legacy back. It's about justice." He could see the terror in her eyes, but underneath it, a flicker of the old fire he remembered. The fire of the woman who would never back down from a debate, who fought fiercely for what she believed in. "What do I have to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He gave her an invitation to the gala, one he had secured through his own foundation's table. You don't need to do anything but tell the truth. Loudly. The days leading up to the gala were the most stressful of Timothy's life. He was living a double life. In public, he and Bridget maintained the facade of the perfect power couple, attending pre-gala events and discussing the Garrett merger as if it were a done deal. Bridget, believing he had come to his senses, was pleased her earlier coldness replaced by a triumphant warmth. At night, he was with Ben running simulations, memorizing security patrol routes, and planning for every contingency. He also took care of Kelly. He sent a high-end stylist to her apartment with a selection of elegant, understated gowns. He didn't want her to feel like she was in costume. He wanted her to feel empowered to walk into that ballroom, not as a waitress, but as Dmitri Petrov's daughter there to reclaim her family's honor. She chose a simple, deep navy dress that brought out the intensity in her eyes. When she tried it on, he saw not a victim, but a warrior preparing for battle. The night of the Starlight Foundation Gala arrived. The Plaza Hotel was a swarm of flashing cameras, television crews, and black cars. Inside the grand ballroom was a glittering spectacle of diamonds and champagne. Timothy, with Bridget on his arm, navigated the sea of influential guests, smiling, shaking hands, his stomach a tight knot of anxiety. He spotted Garrett near the main stage, holding court, accepting accolades with practiced humility. Timothy watched him, his gaze tracking the man's every move. He saw it a small silver USB key attached to the same ring as his car keys, which Garrett occasionally took from his pocket to gesture with. Ben was in a van parked a block away, networked into the hotel's system, a headset connecting him to a tiny, almost invisible earpiece Timothy was wearing. "I'm in," Ben's voice buzzed in his ear. "I have eyes on the ballroom cameras. The laptop is staged in the service closet behind the West Bar. It's live. You have a 90-second window from the moment you get the key." Timothy saw Kelly enter the ballroom. She was poised, her head held high, but he could see the slight tremor in her hands. Their eyes met across the room, a silent exchange of fear and resolve. He gave her a subtle nod. It was almost time. Bridget, oblivious, squeezed his arm. "There's Wendell. We should go over and congratulate him before his speech. It will be good for optics." As they approached, Garrett was introduced. Applause filled the room as he stepped up to the podium. He began his speech, his voice smooth and resonant, speaking of corporate responsibility and the importance of giving back. He was the very picture of a benevolent leader. "It's now or never," Ben's voice crackled in Timothy's ear. Timothy looked at Kelly. She took a deep, shaky breath and began to walk toward the stage. The gambit was on. The grand ballroom was silent, hanging on Wendell Garrett's every word as he stood at the podium, a portrait of philanthropy. "And so it is our duty to build a future founded on trust, integrity, and transparency," he concluded, basking in the applause. That's when a clear voice cut through the room, silencing the clapping hands. "The only mistake is you standing on that stage talking about integrity." Kelly Petrov emerged from the crowd, walking toward the stage with a steady, unflinching resolve. A collective gasp rippled through the audience as camera flashes began to pop. Garrett's polished smile faltered, replaced by a flash of disbelief and fury as he recognized her. "Security," he hissed into the microphone. "Remove this woman." But Kelly stood her ground, her voice ringing with newfound strength. "My name is Kelly Petrov, and this man, Wendell Garrett, is a thief. He built his company by defrauding my dying father, Dmitri Petrov." The accusation, raw and electric, stunned the ballroom into silence. Garrett's face turned crimson with rage. "This is slander. A pathetic attempt at extortion. I tried to save Dmitri from his own incompetence. As Garrett moved to confront her, the chaotic scene Timothy had planned for erupted. This was his window. Ben's voice was a calm presence in his earpiece. "Go time, Timothy. The clock is running." He started moving through the stunned guests, just as Bridget, her face a mask of cold fury, pushed past him to confront Kelly directly. "How dare you?" She spat, her voice dripping with disdain. "How dare you come here and ruin this night with your lies? You're just some pathetic woman from Timothy's past, trying to get a handout. The venomous public attack was the final piece of the distraction." As Garrett and the security guards focused on the escalating confrontation between the two women, Timothy reached Garrett's side, feigning an attempt to de-escalate the situation. "Wendell, let's handle this privately," he said, placing a hand on the man's arm. Enraged and utterly fixated on Kelly, Garrett tried to shove him off. In that single chaotic moment, Timothy's other hand moved with lightning speed, deftly unclipping the keychain from Garrett's belt. No one noticed. He had the USB key. "Move!" Now Ben's voice urged. 75 seconds. While all eyes were on the vicious drama unfolding on stage, Timothy slipped away through the bewildered crowd heading for the West Bar. He entered a designated service closet, the sudden silence a stark contrast to the mayhem outside. The laptop was open its screen, casting a blue glow on his face. His hands trembled slightly as he plugged the USB key into the cloning device. A small light blinked. He watched a progress bar fill with agonizing slowness. 10 seconds. 15. 20. A single word flashed on the screen, cloned. He yanked the key and slipped back out, his heart hammering. He returned to the stage just as Garrett, having lost all composure, grabbed Kelly's arm. "You will pay for this," he snarled. Looking for these, Wendell, Timothy's voice cut through the air. He stepped forward, holding up the keychain. Garrett's eyes widened in horror. He instinctively checked his belt, and the blood drained from his face as he understood he'd been played. This wasn't a desperate woman's outburst. It was a perfectly executed trap. "What is the meaning of this?" He blustered. "It's over," Timothy said, his voice cold as steel. In his ear, he heard Ben's triumphant confirmation. "I'm in. It's all here. Sending the package now." As if on cue, the massive screens on either side of the stage flickered to life. The gala logo was replaced by a scanned document, a patent application signed by Dmitry Petrov. It was followed by a bank statement showing a multi-million-dollar transfer from Petrov Designs to an offshore shell corporation. A stunned, absolute silence fell over the ballroom. Garrett stared at the screens, his mouth agape, his entire world being dismantled before a live audience. He was a king dethroned in his own court. Bridget looked from the damning evidence on the screens to Timothy, her expression crumbling into horrified disbelief. "Timothy, what have you done?" she whispered. "You've ruined everything." "No," Timothy said, his gaze finally finding Kelly's. Her tears were not of sorrow, but of pure, unadulterated vindication. "I've just started to make things right." As the first police officers began to enter the now silent ballroom, the collapse was complete, public, and absolute. The aftermath of the Starlight Foundation Gala was a media whirlwind. Dubbed the Gala Gambit, the story of Timothy's public takedown of Wendell Garrett became legendary. Garrett was arrested that night, his empire crumbling under the weight of irrefutable evidence. While the billion-dollar merger was dead, Helios Dynamics was ironically lauded for its CEO's integrity, its stock rebounding stronger than ever. Timothy's personal life, however, required a clean break. Back in their silent penthouse, Bridget's fury was palpable. "You used me," she seethed. "You humiliated me in front of everyone, all for a waitress." "I did what was right," Timothy replied, the chasm between their worlds now absolute. There was nothing left to say. Her departure that night was a quiet end to a life he no longer wanted. His focus was on justice for Kelly. With Timothy's backing, the legal fight was swift. The courts restored Dmitry Petrov's patents and awarded a significant settlement to his estate. But for Kelly, it was never about the money. "My father dreamed of building sustainable, affordable housing," she told Timothy one afternoon, her gaze fixed on a future she could finally see. He believed good architecture could change lives. That's the legacy Garrett stole. Timothy didn't offer her a job. He offered her a partnership. They established the Petrov Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to making her father's vision a reality. Kelly became its director, and the transformation was astounding. The brilliant, passionate woman from college re-emerged, now forged stronger by her trials. She commanded meetings with a quiet, unshakable purpose. Timothy, her partner and staunchest supporter, found more joy in helping her build a single community center than he ever had in closing a corporate deal. She was grounding him, reminding him of the man he'd always wanted to be. One evening they stood together on a hill overlooking the frame of their first project, silhouetted against the sunset. "Do you remember that pact we made?" Timothy asked softly. "If one of us makes it big, we pull the other one up." Kelly turned to him, her smile genuine and radiant a sight he had missed for over a decade. She took his hand. "I think you got it wrong, Timothy," she said. "You didn't pull me up. We both fell. We just taught each other how to fly again." In that quiet moment, the old titles Millionaire, Waitress finally dissolved. They were just Timothy and Kelly, two friends who had found their way back, ready to build a new foundation together. The story of Timothy and Kelly reminds us that our past is never truly gone. It walks with us, shapes us, and sometimes it comes knocking when we least expect it, asking if we're still the person we promised we would be. Their journey wasn't just about a millionaire saving a waitress. It was about two people saving each other from the lives they were trapped in. It's a powerful testament to loyalty, the courage to do what's right, and the fact that true wealth is not measured in dollars but in the promises we keep and the people we refuse to leave behind. If their story moved, you please take a moment to hit that like button to let us know. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to make things right, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. What do you think was the biggest turning point for Timothy? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.